everybody, welcome to the Saturday Surface Interval in association with the extreme sports magazine Empora, but more about them later. So today we are busting myths about scuba diving because to the non-divers out there who are maybe, hopefully, thinking about becoming divers, there are a few misconceptions out there, either from movies or from just general social beliefs basically. But we are here to smash through a few of those lies that might have been holding some of you back from learning how to dive, and just some other myths that just kind of bug us as scuba divers. So let's jump in and bust some more myths about scuba diving, because we've already debunked some scuba diving myths that you can find up here in this video. But anyway, let's get back to today's video. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more of this quality content. So often on the news and movies and TV shows and just general things on the radio, you'll hear about a diver and they're using their oxygen tank. And every time they do it, I cringe, because it's technically wrong on two separate counts. The first one, oxygen. Oxygen is great, but the gas that we breathe underwater is normally just air. Good old-fashioned filtered air, which is around 20.9% oxygen that most of us are breathing right now. 21% oxygen, that's it, just air. Some divers do increase the amount of oxygen in our tanks when we dive. We call that nitrox, but that can actually limit how deep we can actually go. As you dive down underwater, the increase of pressure means that you're absorbing more oxygen, and too much of a good thing can be bad for you. So taking a tank of pure oxygen on a dive means that you can only dive down to a few meters, which really isn't much fun. It's ruddy expensive as well. Oh, and the second part of oxygen tanks that's wrong is that they're not tanks, they're cylinders. Tanks are containers to be filled with liquids, not gases. Or, you know, the big army cars with the guns on top. That's a tank. A lot of people seem to think that there's no chance in even thinking about learning how to dive or going on a try dive because they have a certain medical condition like asthma or something. Now, while yes, some conditions will prevent you from diving for your safety, many are actually perfectly fine, and others just come with some recommendations on what you need to do. The important thing is that you at least ask the question. The best person to ask would be your local dive doctor, and you can find them with a fairly quick search online, or you can ask someone like the Divers Alert Network to help. Scuba diving is being used more and more as therapy for people with disabilities, so at least have the conversation before you just outright rule out diving. Try and talk to someone in the diving industry, and ideally a medical specialist. Now, your normal GP may not fully understand the physics and biology of scuba diving because it's quite a niche subject, so they may just recommend that you avoid it altogether to just err on the side of caution for both yours and their safety. So it's actually best if you try to talk to a dive doctor specialist who actually understands a bit more about scuba diving and your body and your conditions, and they can give better recommendations. You may have heard of dive tables and scuba divers logging their dives, and thought that a big part of scuba diving is in very thorough planning and calculations. Whilst it is important to plan dives and know what's happening to your body at depth, it isn't common to spend hours flipping through reference books and dive tables to just go for a single fun dive. If you're doing something really specific for a job or particularly deep, then yes, you are going to be doing your calculations, but for at least, 90% of diving, most divers would just let their dive computer do all the hard work and they won't even look at dive tables. Today, most divers wear dive computers that do all of the work for you, and they're actually more accurate than dive tables because they have pressure sensors built into them that monitor your actual depth at all times and work out how long you can stay there and when you should start to go up. For a lot of dives, I'll take a note of the maximum depth and the maximum dive time and then just let my dive computer do the rest, to be honest. Recreational scuba diving isn't that taxing mentally, and you shouldn't have to be working things out in your head underwater on a recreational dive. It's unnecessary. Simply Scuba works closely with the extreme sports online magazine Empora, who cover all sorts of topics from warm, sunny climates to freezing snow and ice. Anything and everything from water sports like scuba diving and surfing to rock climbing and downhill mountain biking, Empora is the place to be for the latest news and events and everything that's going on. Everything from reviews on the latest and greatest gear and upcoming gear as well, and advice from industry-leading specialists. Check them out after this video by clicking on the link in the description or searching online for Empora. Personally, I have run out of air on a dive, but that was actually the plan of the dive, to run out of air and see how long it takes, and it took forever to actually drain my cylinder down to nothing, and you can feel it coming a really long way away, so the chances of you just running out of air like that are incredibly slim. Because of the amount of air that we carry on our back, we use regulators that regulate the pressure and the amount of gas that gets released from that cylinder, and when you start to get low on gas, you can actually feel a slight change in your air supply, so it should never be a surprise. If something should happen to your equipment, you still have plenty of time. Most of our equipment is designed to fail in an open position, in that should any part inside break or malfunction, it will give you more air and you can still breathe. You always dive with an alternate air source that you can switch and breathe to, and you also have your buddy as well nearby that can also act as an air supply, so it really isn't a problem. Even if you cut a hose completely in half, the flow restrictions on regulators will actually limit how fast it will leak air, so I wouldn't worry about it. Even if the worst should happen, you still actually have plenty of time on most dives. It's the final act of the Hollywood movie, and the intrepid protagonist is trapped, or they're facing the bad guy, but all they have is a scuba diving tank and a rock. Now, Hollywood would let you believe that if you bash a scuba tank valve with something heavy, it will break off and the tank will then turn into a small missile and destroy the bad guy. This really isn't the case. Scuba diving tanks are tough, and the Mythbusters actually did this and busted the myth because the amount of force to shear that tank valve off is just immense. If you do manage to rupture a dive cylinder somehow, then yeah, it will fly around as gas inside escapes, and it would be very dangerous, but if you smack a tank valve with a rock or a hammer, it's just going to make a lot of noise and you're probably going to end up hurting yourself, to be honest. Now, I've seen tanks that have fallen out of the back of a truck onto the valve itself, and it just bent the valve a little bit. Now, obviously, do be careful with your dive equipment, but don't worry that if you just casually bump into something, your tank is going to explode or you're going to shoot out of the water like a Polaris missile, because that's not going to happen. Your dive equipment is actually pretty tough. So as ever, Hollywood has a lot to answer for, and scuba diving really isn't as fragile or as complicated as a lot of people think, and it is definitely worth at least asking if you can scuba dive instead of just thinking that your condition will just rule you out, because you might be missing out on something truly amazing. So just ask your local dive doctor. If you have any scuba diving myths that you want busted, or just something that you've come across, then let us know down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and of course, safe diving. But we are here to smash through some of those lies that might be holding you back from learning how to dive, and some others that are just kind of bug us, basically. So let's jump in and bust some myths about scuba diving. myths.